I deserved the judgment coming my way, but not for the reasons everyone assumes. When I told Marcus that what happened between Dylan and me was only emotional, I genuinely believed I was being honest, or at least honest enough. The way people look at me now, you'd think I'd carried on some torrid, physical affair behind his back for months. What's at stake isn't just my marriage, though that evaporated the moment Marcus silently handed me divorce papers 3 days after my confession. It's the version of myself I've clung to my entire adult life. The woman who does the right thing, who communicates, who handles problems maturely. My entire identity shattered when Marcus's face went blank, and he simply walked away. No screaming, no arguing, just stone-cold finality. I'm going to lay everything out exactly as it happened, including the part I didn't tell Marcus, the detail that would have made his silent exit look merciful. Because what I shared with Dylan actually did stay emotional, technically. But the timeline of when things started and what I knew about Marcus at the time changes everything. And there's one specific night I've never mentioned to anyone. Marcus and I met through work 6 years ago. I was the marketing director at a pharmaceutical company. He was the external auditor who came in quarterly. Our courtship was practical, mature, none of that wild passion you see in movies, but something I believed was more sustainable. We enjoyed the same podcasts, had similar retirement goals, appreciated quiet evenings with good wine. At 32, I thought I'd found the adult relationship that would carry me through life. The first hint that something was missing came about 8 months into our marriage. Marcus started a new position, requiring extensive travel, 10 days a month, sometimes more. I told myself I didn't mind the space. I'd always been independent, but I started noticing how little I actually missed him when he was gone. Not in a hostile way, just neutrally, like missing a roommate who pays their bills on time. I should have said something then. Instead, I threw myself into developing our company's social media strategy, which is how I started working closely with Dylan. He joined as our content creator, 12 years my junior, at 26, with this infectious enthusiasm about storytelling that I'd somehow lost. We started having working lunches to brainstorm campaigns. Completely professional. Completely innocent. At first. The shift happened so gradually, I didn't recognize it as dangerous. Dylan would text me funny observations during boring executive meetings. We'd share music recommendations. He'd ask my opinion on things that had nothing to do with work philosophy, politics, his complicated relationship with his father. I started checking my phone more frequently when Marcus was home, angling the screen away. Just because I didn't want to explain the inside jokes, I told myself. Marcus wouldn't understand our sense of humor. That rationalization should have been a screaming siren. By month 3 of Dylan and I working together, I was spending more time crafting responses to his messages than talking to my husband. When Marcus called from business trips, I'd keep conversations short. Yes, work's busy. Everything's fine. Talk soon. Then immediately return to my text conversation with Dylan. We were discussing books, sharing childhood stories, analyzing each other's dreams and fears. One night, Dylan sent me a song at 11 p.m. with the message, "This made me think of you." I listened to it 3 times with headphones while Marcus slept beside me and felt something unfurl in my chest that I hadn't experienced in years. It was just a song, just a thoughtful gesture between friends. But I fell asleep smiling at my phone, and when Marcus touched my shoulder the next morning, I felt irritated by the interruption. I was comparing them constantly by then, keeping a mental scorecard. Marcus never asked about my deeper thoughts anymore. When had we stopped having those conversations? Dylan wanted to understand everything about how my mind worked. Marcus planned practical grocery lists. Dylan sent me poetry. Marcus's idea of affection was patting my hand during movies. Dylan wrote paragraphs about what he valued in our friendship. The word friendship was doing heavy lifting I refused to examine. 4 months into my emotional entanglement with Dylan, Marcus came home early from a trip, excited to surprise me. I was in our bedroom on a video call with Dylan, supposedly discussing campaign analytics. We were actually talking about our worst relationship mistakes. I just finished telling Dylan about my college boyfriend when I heard Marcus's key in the door. The panic that shot through me, I slammed the laptop closed so fast Dylan didn't even get a goodbye. I rushed downstairs with a too bright smile, heart hammering. Marcus noticed something was off. "You okay? You seem flustered." "Just surprised. Wasn't expecting you until Thursday." He pulled out flowers he'd bought at the airport. "Missed you. Thought we could have a nice dinner together." I felt nothing looking at those flowers except mild guilt. Not because I wanted to be with Dylan instead, but because I realized I didn't particularly want to be with either of them. I wanted to be alone, texting Dylan about everything except the life I was actually living. We went to dinner. Marcus talked about his project. I nodded appropriately while composing responses to Dylan in my head. When Marcus reached across the table to hold my hand, I let him. But I was thinking about how Dylan had told me earlier that day that I was the most intellectually stimulating person he'd ever met. Marcus had never said anything like that. Did Marcus even think I was interesting? The resentment bloomed ugly and fast. I started picking fights with Marcus over trivial things. He loaded the dishwasher wrong. He didn't ask detailed questions about my day. He fell asleep during the documentary I'd chosen. Each minor infraction became evidence in my mental case against him. "See, we're not compatible. We don't connect. This marriage was a mistake." Meanwhile, Dylan and I texted from waking up until going to bed. Good morning messages, good night wishes, hundreds of messages daily. We had lengthy phone conversations in my car during lunch breaks. We shared our locations with each other for safety. When his girlfriend broke up with him, I was the first person he called, crying. I talked him through it for 2 hours, feeling simultaneously sympathetic and secretly pleased that he'd turned to me. I told myself we were just close friends, but I was lying to Marcus about where I was. Working late meant getting coffee with Dylan. Running errands meant extended conversations in parking lots. I deleted message threads and created a separate hidden folder for our texts. I changed Dylan's name in my phone to Dana, in case Marcus saw notifications. These weren't actions of someone maintaining a friendship. 6 months in, Dylan told me he was falling in love with me. We were in my car after a working lunch that had lasted 3 hours. He'd been quieter than usual, and when I asked what was wrong, he just said it. "I can't keep pretending this is just friendship. I'm in love with you, and I think you feel the same way." I should have shut it down immediately. Should have said this was inappropriate, created boundaries, protected my marriage. Instead, I sat there in silence for 30 seconds that felt like hours, then whispered, "I do feel the same way." We didn't kiss, didn't touch beyond his hand briefly covering mine. But the admission hung between us, acknowledged and real. We'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. That night, I went home to Marcus and acted completely normal. Made dinner, discussed his day, had perfunctory sex that felt like betraying myself rather than betraying him with someone else. I stared at the ceiling afterward, thinking about Dylan's confession, and realized I'd been emotionally checked out of my marriage for months. Dylan and I never became physical. This is important because it's technically true, though it misses the entire point. We didn't need to touch to betray our respective commitments. What we had was more intimate than many sexual relationships. We'd created a private world that excluded everyone else, especially Marcus. We talked about hypothetical futures. What if we'd met when we were both single? Could we imagine building a life together? We skirted right up to the edge of planning a real future, without quite stepping over. It was Schrödinger's affair, simultaneously real and not real, as long as we didn't make it physical. I convinced myself this technicality mattered. The breaking point came after a company party, 7 months into my emotional affair. Dylan and I spent the entire evening talking in the corner, oblivious to everyone else. Our body language must have been obvious, leaning close, constant eye contact. That exclusive bubble couples create. Multiple coworkers commented that we seemed really close. Marcus had attended as my +1. He'd spent most of the evening networking, which I'd privately resented. How dare he not pay attention to me, while I was actively ignoring him for another man? The cognitive dissonance was spectacular. On the drive home, Marcus asked, "What's going on with you and Dylan?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" "You two seemed very intense tonight. He's my coworker. We're friends. We work together constantly." It seemed like more than that. This was my moment. My chance to come clean, to salvage something honest from the wreckage. Marcus was offering me an opening to tell the truth. "You're being paranoid," I said instead. "Maybe if you were around more, you'd understand my work relationships better." I turned it back on him, made him the problem. He went quiet, and we drove the rest of the way in silence. That night marked a shift. I stopped feeling guilty about my emotional affair and started feeling justified. Marcus didn't understand me. Marcus was never around. Marcus didn't fulfill my emotional needs. I built an entire narrative where I was the victim of an unfulfilling marriage, and Dylan was simply the person who recognized my worth. The affair intensified. Dylan and I started saying "I love you" in our messages. We talked explicitly about how hard it was not to be together. We discussed what we'd do if we were both single, where we'd go on our first real date, what our life might look like. We were planning a relationship that didn't exist while pretending we weren't actually having one. I fantasized about leaving Marcus, but I didn't want to be the bad guy. I wanted Marcus to end things, or to give me an ironclad reason to leave. Catch him cheating. Have him become cruel. Something that would justify my exit and my feelings for Dylan. Marcus didn't cooperate with this fantasy. He remained his steady, reliable, emotionally unavailable self. 8 months into my emotional affair, I made a decision I've never told anyone about. Marcus was leaving for a 2-week consulting project in Singapore. Dylan had invited me to a cabin his family owned upstate for the weekend. Just as friends, he said, though we both knew that was bullshit. I told Marcus I was going to a marketing conference in Boston. I packed a bag, printed fake conference materials, created an entire elaborate lie. The planning alone should have told me how far gone I was. This wasn't a spontaneous mistake, it was premeditated deception. The night before I was supposed to leave, I lay in bed beside Marcus, watching him sleep. Some part of me understood this was the point of no return. If I got in my car and drove to that cabin with Dylan, the emotional affair would become physical. The technicality I'd been hiding behind would evaporate. I got up at 3 a.m. and sat in our bathroom, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked like a stranger. When had I become someone who lied so easily, who built elaborate deceptions, who was ready to blow up her entire life for a relationship that might just be an escape fantasy? I didn't go to the cabin, but not because I suddenly developed a conscience or rediscovered my love for Marcus. I didn't go because I was terrified. Terrified that Dylan and I, alone for a weekend, would reveal that our connection only worked in stolen moments and text messages. Terrified that making it real would ruin the fantasy. Terrified of being the definitive bad guy in my own story. I told Dylan I was sick. He was disappointed, but understanding. I went to the fake conference instead, actually booked a hotel in Boston, and spent 3 days alone, trying to figure out what I was doing with my life. Those 3 days gave me clarity, but not the kind that saved my marriage. I realized I didn't want to be with Marcus anymore. Our relationship had become a performance, and I resented every minute of it. But I also realized I didn't know if what I felt for Dylan was real or just an escape from my failing marriage. I came home determined to end things with Marcus, honestly. I'd tell him I'd developed feelings for someone else, that our marriage wasn't working, that we should separate. Marcus greeted me at the door with tickets to a couple's retreat. "I know things have been distant between us," he said. "I want to work on it. I love you and I want to remember why we got married." The genuine emotion on his face, this man was trying. He'd noticed our problems and was taking action, and here I was, fresh from almost spending a weekend with another man, ready to ask for a divorce. I couldn't do it. Couldn't look at his hopeful face and destroy him. "That sounds great," I heard myself say. "Let's work on us." The couple's retreat was scheduled for 3 weeks later. In that time, I tried to distance myself from Dylan. Shorter messages, less personal conversation, creating boundaries I should have established months ago. Dylan noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked. "No, I need to figure out my marriage. I thought you said it was over emotionally." "It is. It's complicated. It's only complicated because you're making it complicated. You love me. I love you. Everything else is just fear." He wasn't wrong, but he also wasn't right. I did love him, or believed I did, but I'd also used him as an emotional crutch to avoid dealing with my actual marriage problems. The couple's retreat was in Vermont. 5 days of workshops, therapy sessions, and forced quality time. Marcus approached it with genuine enthusiasm. I approached it with dread and my phone hidden in my luggage, sneaking messages to Dylan when Marcus was in the shower. On day 2, during a trust exercise, the facilitator asked us to share one truth you've been afraid to tell your partner. Marcus went first. "I felt you pulling away for months, and I've been too scared to ask why, because I'm afraid of the answer." Everyone looked at me expectantly. This was it. Another clear opportunity to be honest. "I felt us drifting too," I said. "I think we stopped really communicating somewhere along the way." Safe, vague, true enough to sound honest without revealing anything real. We spent the next 3 days working through surface-level issues. Marcus's travel schedule, my work stress, our lack of quality time together. We made plans to do weekly date nights, to check in with each other daily, to be more intentional about our marriage. I participated fully in all of it, while texting Dylan every chance I got. On our last night at the retreat, Marcus and I had the best sex we'd had in over a year. He was attentive, present, emotionally connected. I responded physically, while mentally I was somewhere else entirely. Afterwards, he held me close and said, "I feel like I got you back." I felt like the worst person alive. We returned home, recommitted to our marriage. Marcus started traveling less, arranging his schedule to be home more. He planned thoughtful dates. He asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. He was trying so hard. I resented every gesture because they highlighted what had been missing before, and because they made it harder to justify my feelings for Dylan. Dylan, meanwhile, was growing impatient. "When are you going to leave him? We're wasting time we could be together." It's not that simple. The retreat helped. We're working on things. Working on things? You told me you didn't love him anymore. I don't know what I feel. I need time. How much time? I can't keep being your secret while you play house with him. The pressure from both sides was crushing. Marcus wanting more of me, Dylan wanting all of me, and me, stuck in the middle, unable to commit to either direction because both meant admitting I'd been lying to someone or everyone. This stalemate continued for another month. I was exhausted from maintaining 2 different versions of myself. At work, I was Dylan's soulmate, his intellectual equal, the woman he loved. At home, I was Marcus's wife, working on our marriage, pretending to invest in our future. The crash came on a Tuesday. I'd forgotten to delete a text thread with Dylan. Marcus and I were looking at something on my phone together when a message notification popped up, "I miss you. Can't stop thinking about last night's conversation. You're everything to me." The message was from Dana. "Who's Dana?" Marcus asked casually. My mind went blank. Coworker. That's an interesting message from a coworker. She's going through a breakup, very emotional right now, leaning on me for support. Marcus looked at me for a long moment. "Can I see the rest of the conversation?" "Why? Don't you trust me?" "Should I?" We stared at each other. He held out his hand for the phone. I had a choice: refuse and confirm his suspicions, or hand it over and watch everything explode. I handed him the phone. He scrolled in silence. I watched his face as he read months of conversations, the progression from friendly to intimate, the "I love yous," the discussions about our potential future, the messages from the weekend he'd been in Singapore. When I was supposedly at a conference, he scrolled for 15 minutes without saying a word. I stood there, frozen, unable to speak or move. Finally, he set the phone down. His face was completely blank. "It was only emotional," I blurted out. "Nothing physical happened. We never even kissed." He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "We never had sex, never touched. It was just talking, just emotional support. It didn't mean anything physical happened." "Emotional," he repeated flatly. "Yes, I know it's still wrong, but I want you to know that nothing physical." "Get out, Marcus. Get out of this room. I need to be alone." His voice was so quiet, so empty. Part of me wanted him to yell, to throw things, to give me the dramatic confrontation that would make this feel real. Instead, he just looked through me like I'd already ceased to exist. I left the room, slept on the couch, woke up to find Marcus already gone for work, though it was barely 6 a.m. I texted him, "We need to talk about this." No response. I called. Voicemail. He came home late that night. I'd prepared a whole speech about how sorry I was, how confused I'd been, how I wanted to work through this. "I'm staying at a hotel," he said, grabbing a duffel bag. "My lawyer will contact you." "Marcus, please, we can fix this. Couples therapy, whatever you need. It was a mistake." "A mistake is forgetting to buy milk. This was a choice you made every single day for months. But nothing physical happened. Do you think that matters?" His voice finally rose. "You shared your whole internal world with another man. You told him things you stopped telling me. You planned a future with him while lying to my face. You said 'I love you' to someone else. Do you think the lack of sex makes that better? I just want you to understand. I understand perfectly. You chose him emotionally, while keeping me around for, what? Financial security? Convenience? The appearance of respectability? That's not fair. What's not fair is believing your husband would want to work on your marriage while you were texting another man that you loved him." He zipped his bag. "The retreat. Jesus Christ. We had sex in Vermont while you were messaging him?" "I was trying." "You were hedging your bets." He walked toward the door, then turned back. "The worst part? If you just told me you were unhappy, that you'd fallen out of love with me, I would have been hurt, but I would have understood. People grow apart. It happens. But you made me believe we were fighting for the same thing while you were actively betraying me. You made me feel crazy for sensing something was wrong. You let me try to fix a marriage you'd already left. I never wanted to hurt you." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You just wanted to not feel like the bad guy while you did it." That was 3 days ago. True to his word, Marcus's lawyer contacted me the next morning. Divorce papers. No fault. Requesting a clean division of assets. No alimony sought. We offered. Efficient and emotionless, just like Marcus. I tried to reach him multiple times. Every call went to voicemail. Every text went unanswered. I showed up at his hotel. The front desk wouldn't confirm he was staying there. I went to his office. His assistant said he was unavailable. He'd erased me from his life with the same silent efficiency he brought to everything else. Dylan's response when I told him what happened: "So now we can finally be together." I stared at that message for 20 minutes before replying, "I need space from everyone right now." Are you serious? I've been waiting for months for you to leave him, and now that you finally have, you need space from me? I didn't leave him. He left me, and I need to process that. You're unbelievable. I've put my life on hold for you. I never asked you to do that. That was yesterday. Dylan hasn't responded since, and I'm sitting in the house I shared with Marcus, surrounded by the life we built, realizing I destroyed everything, and I'm not even sure what for. Because here's what I didn't tell Marcus, what I've barely admitted to myself: I don't think I was ever really in love with Dylan. I was in love with feeling desired, understood, intellectually stimulated, all the things that had faded from my marriage through years of routine and complacency. Dylan represented possibility, excitement, the fantasy that I could be someone different from the person I'd become. But I don't actually know if Dylan and I would work in real life. I don't know if our connection would survive the mundane realities of a real relationship. Grocery shopping and mortgage payments and Thursday nights when neither of us feels like talking. I never gave it the chance to become real, because keeping it as fantasy served me better. I used Dylan as an escape hatch from my marriage, instead of doing the hard work of either fixing it or ending it honestly. And I used Marcus as safety and stability while I explored my feelings for someone else. I'd betrayed them both, just in different ways. My coworkers have started looking at me differently. Somehow word got out about the situation. Maybe Dylan told someone. Or maybe the tension between us is just that obvious now. I'm the woman who had an emotional affair. Whispers stop when I enter rooms. I've been excluded from lunches I used to be invited to. My best friend Sarah was blunt when I told her what happened. I love you, but what did you expect? You lied to everyone, to Marcus, to Dylan, to yourself. You don't get to play victim here. My mom's response was worse. Profound disappointment. I raised you to have integrity, she said quietly. I don't recognize the person you've been describing. Neither do I, honestly. I've spent the past 3 days looking through old photos of Marcus and me. Our wedding day, we both looked so hopeful. Early vacation photos where we're genuinely smiling. The slow progression to more recent pictures where we're standing next to each other instead of with each other. The connection visibly faded. Our marriage had real problems. We'd grown complacent, stopped nurturing our emotional intimacy, let work and routine replace actual connection. Those are real issues that deserved to be addressed. But instead of addressing them like an adult through honest conversation, therapy, or even a straightforward statement that I was unhappy, I chose the coward's path. I found someone new to fill the void, lied about it for months, and only came partially clean when I got caught. And even then, I minimized it. Only emotional. As if that phrase somehow made it less of a betrayal. As if the fact that Dylan and I never had sex meant I hadn't fundamentally violated my marriage vows. The truth I've been avoiding, the emotional betrayal, might actually be worse. I gave Dylan the parts of myself that should have belonged to my marriage. My inner thoughts, my vulnerabilities, my emotional energy, my romantic feelings. I chose him as my primary emotional partner, while keeping Marcus around as my legal spouse. Sex would have been a single additional transgression. What I actually did was months of continuous choosing Dylan over Marcus in every meaningful way except physically. Marcus's complete silence might be the worst punishment. Part of me wants the big confrontation, the screaming match, the dramatic finale, where we both say horrible things and achieve some kind of cathartic closure. Instead, I get nothing. He's processed his grief, made his decision, and removed me from his life with surgical precision. I don't even get to be the one who left. He left me, which wasn't supposed to be how this story went. I'm telling this story now because I signed the divorce papers this morning. Marcus didn't request anything except efficiency. Our lawyers worked out the details without us ever having to speak. 6 years of marriage dissolved through intermediaries. As I signed my name, my lawyer asked if I wanted to try to contact Marcus one more time. Some people find it helps with closure. I thought about it. Thought about all the things I'd say if he'd listen. That I was sorry. That I'd been confused and selfish. That our marriage had real problems, but I'd handled them in the worst possible way. That he deserved someone who would choose him fully, instead of keeping one foot out the door. But what's the point? He knows all of that. My apologies don't undo months of betrayal. My explanations don't change what I did. And honestly, he deserves better than my attempts to assuage my guilt by confessing everything, now that there are no real consequences left to face. So I didn't reach out. I signed the papers, returned them to my lawyer, and came home to write this all out because I need to see it clearly. Need to stop hiding behind euphemisms and technicalities. Here's what I did. I fell out of love with my husband, and instead of being honest about it, I found someone new to focus on. I maintained both relationships simultaneously, lying to everyone, including myself. I let Marcus believe we were working on our marriage, while actively investing my emotional energy elsewhere. I made him feel crazy for sensing problems I was actively creating. When confronted, I minimized my actions by focusing on the one line I hadn't crossed. Physical intimacy, as if that technicality absolved me of the months of emotional infidelity. I centered my own fear of being seen as the bad guy, instead of considering the person I was actively hurting. I'm not looking for forgiveness or understanding. I'm not the victim of a passionless marriage or a misunderstood romantic caught between two loves. I'm a woman who made selfish choices consistently for months, who lied when it was convenient, and who's now facing consequences I genuinely didn't think would be this severe. The emotional affair I told Marcus about was real. But the full truth about how long it had been going on, about how close I came to making it physical, about the fake conference and the planned cabin weekend I didn't go to. Those are details I kept to myself. Even when I confessed, I gave him the minimum truth necessary when I was caught, still protecting myself even in the confession. He divorced me for the partial truth. I wonder what he would have done if he'd known everything. Though maybe the most damaging thing isn't the details I kept from Marcus. Maybe it's that I never really knew what I wanted from him, from Dylan, from myself. I blew up my entire life while I was still figuring out what I actually felt. And now I'm left with wreckage and no clarity about whether any of it was real. People keep asking me if it was worth it, if the emotional affair was worth losing my marriage. But that's the wrong question. It's not about worth or value. It's about the fact that I wanted to be someone different than who I'd become in my marriage. And instead of doing the internal work to figure out who that person was, I used another relationship as a mirror. I didn't leave Marcus for Dylan. I left Marcus for the version of myself I became around Dylan. Interesting, desired, emotionally engaged. The problem is that version was as much a fantasy as our relationship. I'm not actually more interesting or better when I'm with Dylan. I'm just different, and different isn't the same as better or authentic or my true self. So now I'm alone, processing what I've learned about my capacity for self-deception and rationalization. learning that I'm fully capable of lying to people I love if it serves my immediate emotional needs. Discovering that my moral compass is far more flexible than I believed. The divorce will be final in 60 days. Marcus will move on, probably to someone who chooses him fully from the beginning. Dylan has already started dating someone else. I saw it on his Instagram. And I felt relief more than jealousy. My coworkers will eventually find someone else's drama to dissect. Life will continue, but I'll carry this knowledge about myself forward. When things got hard in my marriage, I chose deception over honesty, fantasy over reality, and self-protection over integrity. Those are choices I made, not mistakes that happened to me. Active decisions I made daily for months. I told Marcus I only cheated emotionally, like that technicality mattered. He filed papers without a word because he understood what I still didn't. The emotional betrayal was the entire point. The lack of physical intimacy didn't make it better. It just meant I'd betrayed him in the way that actually mattered, while clinging to a technicality to convince myself I wasn't really that bad. I was that bad. Maybe worse, because I knew exactly what I was doing the entire time, and I did it anyway. That's the story. That's the truth I've been avoiding. Not just that I had an emotional affair, but that I'm the kind of person who would construct elaborate justifications for betrayal, who would lie to the person trying to save our marriage, who would prioritize my own narrative over anyone else's reality. You can judge me for that. I'm judging myself pretty harshly these days. But at least now, I'm being honest about it. Even if that honesty comes too late to matter to anyone but me.